shoot people, I suppose. Oh, come on, Francois. This is not the time. Oh.
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I recently spaded the Super Etendard over the last few days in Aerialistic, and the basic reason is because they changed a bunch of BRs in Aerialistic, and this means that the Super Etendard actually has some decent matchmaking. Before, it was just a flood of F5Cs, and also F5Es, and any other American aircraft that decided to have a go. Whereas nowadays, with the Super Etendard, you still see those vehicles, but you also get matches which aren't just filled with them. So you get some Su-25s, you get some A-10s, but also you get some other vehicles in there too. So it's definitely better than it was previously after the most recent compression. Now, does that mean this vehicle is fun to play? Because you might be asking, well, why do you hardly see this vehicle? Why is it one of those that doesn't really float around the place? And the basic reason is because it's really tough to stock grind. This vehicle is one of the worst stock grinds of the last year that I've done. And it's basically because its main armament is at rank 4. In order to unlock the missiles that you need in Aerialistic to be useful, you need to get to rank 4 to unlock the Matra R550 Magic ones. This thing doesn't get AIM-9Bs, it doesn't get any earlier air-to-air missiles, apart from the Magics, so it is just a pain to be able to get access to them. Also, at the same time, one of the key problems that you have with modifying this thing is at the rank 3 modification part, you need to get 3 modifications, right? Which isn't too crazy. That's pretty standard compared to a lot of other machines, but what isn't standard is you need to have researched one of the specific rank 1 modifications in order to unlock one of those rank 3 modifications. So if you don't see that early, you are going to have to go back, research one of those rank 1 modifications before you can actually get the rank 3 modifications modified. So for example, the Atlas pod, which is pretty worthless in Air RB, especially since you won't have any ordnance until you get to rank 3, you have the Matra Nebs or the offensive 30mm. One of those has to be researched before you can actually move into rank 4, because they are all arrow connected to a rank 3 mod, which is required after getting also the engine and the wings repair. So that to me is annoying as hell, and I decided to go for the offensive 30mm, get some extra HE in those 30mm deffer belts to be able to do a decent chunk of damage. The deffers for me worked well for this machine. I've never really had a huge issue with the deffers. Sometimes you get hits and stuff like that, but it's nothing compared to other machines like the 27mm Mausers with the PT shells that we talked about previously. But yeah, so the stock grind of getting to the useful modifications, so the engine, the wings repair, the magics, the G-suit, the cover, is an absolute pain. And there's no other way around it, because this vehicle, it has an okay engine. It's the Matra R550. It doesn't have as much thrust as a lot of other vehicles around, so it's not as fast as other vehicles. It can be very sluggish. Its radar is pretty bad. Its RWR is nice. It actually has a really, really nice RWR for some reason. So there's that at least to have alongside. But without the magics, you really are in a limited space. Now, one of the nice things about the vehicle, though, is you start off with a metric ton of countermeasures. So you can at least stop most of the missiles that are coming in. You have 32 large caliber countermeasures and 108 standard countermeasures. You can bring along the pods, which give you additional countermeasures, which I would highly recommend, especially since you're going to be facing a lot of stuff with tons of missiles. And since you're not fast enough to really get away from anything early on, it's going to be pretty rough to be able to survive without those countermeasures. Now, one of the things I would say is there were times where I got caught out of missiles, even with the countermeasures being fired. and that's because this thing is a lot slower than others, meaning that the missile has time to kind of correct to your engine source from the flare. The flare gets fired out at a huge distance on this thing, so it really should help the vehicle, but for some reason, sometimes it just doesn't. So against stuff like Magics, against stuff like PL5Bs, for example, you have to be careful because they can reconnect pretty quickly onto this vehicle. So once you've struggled through getting all of the standard kind of flight performance mods and then getting the Magic 1, how does the vehicle feel? Overall, it feels quite nice. You know, once you get those mods for the performance, you get up to around about 1,000 kilometers an hour without having to worry. This gives you enough energy to be able to push around. You do have a problem with overload with this vehicle. You won't snap or anything like that, but your pilot will really struggle because this thing does turn a little bit like a bus. So getting the installed boosters helps quite a lot, and then getting the G-suit helps quite a lot too. And it does maintain its speed through a turn, which a lot of vehicles don't do very well. So because that happens, that means there's extra stress on your pilot while he goes around. So you're going to have to get very used to doing the elevator trick, which you can do with all the planes. Now, the Magics are probably the best missile at this BR. At 10.3, you're not really going to get you're not going to get better ones apart from the all aspect A10 ones, probably the AIM-9Ls, because you know they have a lot longer range and burn. But the Magic ones are fantastic. They have a great overload, 35 Gs. They have a very fast speed, and generally are the ones that I've enjoyed the most on this type of vehicle. There is a problem with it though, and the problem is that the Mirage 3C exists at 10.0, and also the Mirage 3E exists at 10.7, which has a better armament than you, and of course the 3E gets itself some countermeasures. So if you want this armament on a useful aircraft, which you don't have to go through as much of a pain to play, and also is more maneuverable, you can just do that at basically the same PR as this thing. Which means that its air-to-air capabilities, even though, you know, you can do okay with it, it just seems like, why would I bother if there is just a better option, right? So the Super Etendard, we played 39 battles, 83 air kills, 21 deaths, 54% win rate, which overall is fine. You know, I'm pretty happy with those stats, especially since the early games, like maybe 10 or 20 games, we were basically useless until we got the missiles. But one thing has to be said. The whole point of this vehicle is it's at 10.3 because of its ground pounding capabilities, right? This is a multi-role vehicle at the end of the day. This is not just an air-to-air vehicle. It has the Magics, which is really nice, and, you know, once you get them, you see how powerful they are. If you know an enemy doesn't have countermeasures, they just die. Stuff like the Mitsubishi F1, or stuff like the T2, for example. If they do have countermeasures, then you just have to wait till they're engaged by something else, and then you just pop them with it. It's very easy. But one of the key things about this vehicle is it has access to a ton of ground ordnance, which, you know, is pretty good. And it has all the CCIPs you'd want for rockets and bombs. It has the CCRP for bombs too. It has the guidance pod, the Atlas II. It gets Nords, the S30Ls. It even gets Paveways, which is awesome at 10.3. This is all fantastic, right? And this is probably why you would grind out this vehicle, so you can use all of these wonderful secondary armaments in ground realistic, right? But there's a problem. There isn't a lineup for this thing in ground realistic. There is not a single vehicle at 10.3. So if you want to actually run this with a lineup, you either have to up-tier a bunch of 9.7s, which is not what you want to do, or you run this thing at 11.7, because the French tech tree jumps from 9.7 to 11.7. So until France gets a 10.3 lineup, the Super Etendard is worthless, because there are just better options at higher BRs that you can bring in ground. So even that role, even the reason to kind of grind it out and use, you know, in that ground area with the GBU-12s, with the AS-30s, with the Magics in tow, you can't do. So this vehicle is just in limbo, and there's no reason to really play it because there are so much better fighter options. The only reason to play this thing is if you personally have some kind of attachment to it, because there are just vehicles which do everything it does but better, and the overall use of the vehicle doesn't exist right now. And hopefully in the future it will. Hopefully they'll bring in some Leopard 2A4s or bring in something in that BR bracket so you can run it with this thing. But at the moment, this vehicle's kind of pointless and just another vehicle which is really tough to stock ground for France, which makes it pretty horrific to get through. For me, I wouldn't recommend it right now, but at the same time, if the Benelux stuff does come in for ground, that does mean Leopards, that does mean more lineups around 10-0, which means that the Super Etendard might have a chance. But right now, is it better to wait for a bit more air decompression, so this thing actually makes a bit more sense at its BR, or is it better just to get it done, to get it out the way? I would go for the first, just because there isn't really a reason to chuck it around right now. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.